Now, in the past, you've actually interviewed Sudanese leaders from the civilian movement and government, one of whom last year told you that a possible military takeover could happen because the signs were there. Has the military ever actually been committed to change and to this transition?
That's a very good question, and my simple answer to that would be no. This power sharing agreement wasn't voluntarily embarked on by the military. They were forced into this power sharing agreement after a horrific massacre of Sudanese protesters on the 3rd of June 2019. There was then mass mobilization at the end of June, and then there was a peace deal signed thereafter. And within this peace deal and this power sharing agreement, in terms of foreign policy, it's clear that the military have been running the show. The transitional Sudanese government, civilian-led government, initially said that normalization with ties with Israel was a decision to be reached by a democratically elected Sudanese government in the future. But after much pressure from the military, they did that. Then there was the Saudi-led war on Yemen, which was particularly unpopular in Sudan because Sudanese foot soldiers were the ones dying while the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates were firing bullets and bombs from the sky. And yet the transitional government committed to continuing that fight, which again suggested that the military won in the show. And then recently, one of the key contestants between the military and the civilian-led government was this idea that the civilians were trying to retrieve money illicitly taken from the Sudanese people during the 30 years of dictatorship. And when they started threatening their financial interests, that's when we started to see these kind of pre-steps to a coup by the military. We saw statements made by Burhan openly criticizing civilian rule. We then saw these fake protests outside the military headquarters, which were clearly facilitated and funded by the military. And then yesterday, we saw the final steps, which was a military coup, state of emergency, arrest of key civilian leaders, such as Prime Minister Hamdok, such as the information minister who you mentioned I interviewed last year, who is also the spokesman for the transitional Sudanese government. And there will be, some people will say, well, the United States has withdrawn funding, 700 million. The EU has condemned this action. The United Nations has condemned this action. But in my opinion, the military council would have known this was going to happen. They took a calculated risk. They knew that funds would be withdrawn from the Persian Gulf monarchies, but they knew, funds would be withdrawn from the United States, but they knew they had support from the Persian Gulf monarchies, principally Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, who couldn't give a toss whether Sudan was democratic or not. In fact, they'd probably prefer an undemocratic state because they would be more consistently reliant on their foreign policy interests.
Ahmed, so what happens next year? I mean, civilians were taken to the street, the civilian government, do they have a leg to stand on now based on your analysis? Especially, it seems, though, as the civilian government within themselves is so fractured.
Yeah, I mean, what happens next is, from the army's perspective, they're going to try to replace the people that they've got rid of by hand-picked technocrats that are going to serve their interests. There will be some sort of elections in 2023, according to General Burhan, but these will not be free and fair. And what will most likely happen is what happened in Egypt, where the army will put forward a candidate who will then win that election in the high 90%. And then there will be a facade of democracy. So then the US and the European allies can start doing business again with Sudan, because all they need is a facade of democracy for them to do business. In Egypt, you couldn't call it democratic, yet it still has full relations with the United States, still has full relations with the European Union, still has full relations with the United Kingdom. And I think they're hoping that they can replicate that and implement that style of governance in the Sudan. But the Sudanese people are aware that what's happening right now is a military coup. It's an attack on a democratic process. It's an attack on civil liberties, and there will be general strikes, and they're going to try their best to stop what they think is happening from happening.
Ahmed Kaballo, really appreciate your analysis, speaking to us there from London. Thanks so much.